Hi, my name is Bianca Bisciola. I'm the COO of SIX, and welcome to the BeMetals Live Investor Summit. I'd like to start today by introducing our presenters, John Wilton and Derek Iwanaka. To kick things off, John will be telling the company story, and then we'll be accepting questions. You can submit your questions in the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Now, without further ado, take it away, John.
Hi, thank you, Bianca. Welcome everyone to our first BeMetals webinar. The main purpose of this presentation is to focus a little bit more on the people within our team, and then a brief update of our recent corporate strategy, and a brief overview of where we are with our current mineral exploration and development projects. So without further ado, let's get into the presentation, forward-looking statements. And then our first slide about the people. Effectively here, we're looking at our board of directors and some of our management team. BeMetals was formed about 2.5 years ago by Clive Johnson, Tom Garrigan, Roger Richier, and myself. As many of you will know, Clive has led a team of seasoned professionals through many decades in both Bema Gold Corporation and B2 Gold, returning incredible amount of value to investors and stakeholders in those companies. We were very pleased earlier this year when Mark Connolly joined the board of the company as non-executive chairman, also bringing a wealth of experience and deal flow, specifically in his region, being based in Australia. My background is as a geologist, and on the next slide, we'll be giving some more background on the more technical side of the team. Since inception of BeMetals, Kristen Reinertsen has been our CFO and corporate secretary, and she leads a very efficient but small back office staff in line with our company culture of maximizing investors' money into the ground and into the projects, and keeping our corporate overheads as low as possible. Derek Iwanaka, who is on the conference today, also brings a wealth of investor relation experience and input into our corporate development strategies. And interestingly enough, Derek also started his career in mining in about 2002 with Bema Gold Corp. Dennis Sansbury is an important member of our wider team, and a very important member of our technical advisory team specifically. Dennis has been responsible for designing and building B2's gold mines across the globe. And Dennis and I spend a lot of time evaluating new projects specifically across the world, where we've looked at projects in the last years in Europe, Africa, South America, and North America. Before I joined BeMetals, I was a regional exploration manager for Antofagasta PLC, the large Chilean copper producer. And our go-to external consultant was Dr. Richard Solito, based in London. Dick and I have published some research work on the Zambian Copperbelt specifically with other colleagues from Antofagasta, and we were very pleased that Dick agreed to join us on the advisory team of BeMetals at the start of the company some 2.5 years ago. Dick is truly a world-renowned economic geologist, and what I like about his work specifically is that research work is often observational based, and he's already provided exceptional value and deal flow into the company. Some of our competitive advantages probably over our peer group is that because of the track record of some of the senior members of the board, we have extensive deal flow across the world in both gold and base metal projects, and the ability to write checks when required for projects and equity financing. So a little bit more about the technical background to some of the people in our team. My background really started as an exploration geologist with a South African company called Anglovol Mining back in 1990, when I lived and worked in South Africa. Subsequently lived and worked in Zambia and Namibia. The sort of relationship with the B2 team came about I was fortunate enough in the late 1990s to be a senior member of the discovery team of what has become now the Otjikoto gold mine in Namibia. Now that deposit was put into production by B2 Gold, and it's currently a very successful operation in the B2 Gold stable. The picture you can see there on the left is a picture of the collar of drill hole OT3, third hole drilled on the property in about 1999. And that was really our first intersection that we thought could be an indication of economic mineralization at that point in time. Bearing in mind the backdrop to gold at that point was that the gold price was rapidly disappearing under $300 an ounce. But one of my good friends and colleagues at that time, Anton Lombard, and I really took this project under our wing and managed to convince investors and the board of the company of that time that this was really truly a valuable asset. And over about a 10-year period, we managed to build a resource base on that property from those initial boreholes to around 2 million ounces. At that time, the project was sold to a company called Oryx Gold Corp, who did more drilling and studies on the property. And then subsequent to that, Tom Garrigan of B2 Gold became aware of the project, realized the value in that property, and took it into the B2 Gold stable. And B2 did an excellent job in very quickly building and exploiting the deposit. Many of you might know Tom Garrigan's discovery record, which is truly very impressive, and something like 30 million ounces of gold under his management has been discovered. One of the sort of flagship discoveries in that time would be the Kupol discovery in Far East Russia that Tom and his team did in a time when Far East Russia was a challenging environment to work. Subsequent to that, he has now taken on the Fekola deposit in Mali and really added significant amount of resources to that. And B2 have now developed a real true world-class mine on that project in Mali. So those are important cultures I think we take across and have merged quite nicely in BeMetals. And this slide probably sums up, if we had to present BeMetals in one slide, this is probably the one we would use. And it really shows very nicely the value creation in both Bema Gold Corporation, now B2 Gold, and we see that BeMetals is the next step in that stable and cycle of value creation for investors in the mineral exploration, development, and mining, ultimately mining business. Derek, if you would like to take us through a snapshot of our corporate overview at this point in time.
Sure, thanks, John. So I'll just highlight a few of the numbers here. Number one would probably be the shares outstanding, 124 million shares outstanding as of today. Of that 124 million, over 25% or a quarter of the company is basically owned by the founding group. So that'd be Clive Johnson, who owns around 8% of the company, Tom Garrigan, John, myself, and others on the board and in the management team. So founders definitely believe in having skin in the game, and we do. And I think we've now purchased about 32 million shares, either on the open market or through private placements. I also like to point out that out of that retail section in the pie chart there, there's 56% is held by retail shareholders. And I would say over half of that is probably held by either friends or family of our founding group. So what is nice is you don't tend to see a huge amount of selling in our stock. I would say that the only downside would be that sometimes the volume is not as high as we'd like to see, but that seems to be improving, and we are doing some more marketing. This is our first webinar, so hopefully things like this help generate some more volume on the stock. And we're still trading about 132,000 shares on a daily basis. One other thing I just point out, our market cap's about $55 billion, and our cash position is pretty good. I think after we closed our last financing in August, we had about $7.7 million. So we're well financed to deliver our catalyst for this year. Back to you, John.
So in about March or April of this year, we made a board level decision to expand our sort of search criteria and corporate strategy to include precious metals to complement our current base metal projects. So since that time, bearing in mind we are now in this current sort of COVID world, if you want to call it that, we have been reviewing a huge number of projects from our deal flow. We've probably looked in a significant way at a desktop level about 40 projects during that time. And we've been able to get boots on the ground on a number of projects that we like the look of through our extensive network with people that we really trust in some of the regions. And myself and Dennis have been able to get to certain projects in North America. Very recently, we're down in the US looking at potential gold opportunities. We see that's a critical part of assessing projects. So that work is ongoing. I think we're getting close to identifying some really good projects, but we have to be patient, and we're not prepared to jump into a project just to get precious metals as a standalone in our inventory. We're looking for those real quality acquisitions that can really add value in line with what the team has done in past years through BEMA and B2. In addition to that gold strategy that we recently added to the corporate picture, we continue to advance our more advanced South Mountain project in Idaho, USA, that relates to a high-grade polymetallic deposit that we've got existing underground development into, and we'll talk more about that in the next slides. Interestingly enough, that project also has a significant precious metal component in both gold and silver. The project that we really founded BeMetals on was a former copper exploration property of mine in northwestern Zambia called the Pangeni Project. That's at a relatively earlier stage, but we're getting some very encouraging drilling results we'll talk about at the end of the presentation. And the advantage of that project is it really does have, if successful, the potential to deliver a true world-class discovery because of the pedigree of that belt. And you'll see the competitors that are working in that region. So just to take very much summary form, this slide was taken a couple of weeks ago underground at South Mountain in Idaho. We've reclassified this deposit geologically following input from Dr. Richard Solito. Previously, it was seen to be more of a skarn type deposit, high grade, but potentially could have been a bit erratic. But the reality is that we've now identified that this is really should be called a carbonate replacement deposit. That sort of sounds like a little bit of geological semantics, but the importance is other carbonate replacement deposits, CRDs as they're known, really do have scope to become significant tonnage deposits and maintain their high-grade nature. This image is a picture of what we call Muck Bay 5, where we did a significant amount of drilling last year, and we have been drilling until earlier this week. So a couple of the factors that really got us interested in this project was that at inception, there is an existing modest tonnage, but high-grade resource at about the 10% zinc level with significant silver, gold, and certain areas with a significant copper component also. We believe there's really excellent potential to grow this resource to a critical mass where we can start an initial mining operation and generate cash flow in the coming years. The capital cost for such an operation will be relatively modest, and the property is on patented or private land, and a majority of the permits are in place that could lead to a construction decision, subject to obviously the correct PEA and feasibility studies. The way we structured the deal with a company called Thunder Mountain Gold, a long-established Idaho-based mining and exploration company, has really been an advantage. They're the optionees of this property, and we brought on the senior members of their management team to form part of our project group. That's led to us being able to really build on their well-established networks, both in Boise, Idaho, and in and around the project site. And that relationship has really developed very nicely, and the project team are really delivering in some challenging circumstances, including the current COVID challenges in Idaho and that site. So just the main sort of drivers and catalysts from that project, we're currently in the middle of an underground drilling campaign at this point in time. We're currently finishing up some drilling on the DMEA zone, and then we'll be moving across to the Texas zone in the southeastern part of the property, where historically there's been more of a copper component to the mineralization. So upon trying to extend the resource in that area, we will conduct other studies. Probably early next year, we will be doing a significant amount of more metallurgical test work, although there is some historical metallurgical test work that shows there are good results in recoveries of the zinc and precious metals into the concentrates. And we expect to start seeing news flow coming out of our current drilling results by December this year. I was on the project for a couple of weeks just very recently down in Idaho, and visual results so far look very encouraging. Subsequent to that, early next year, we'll be building that revised resource estimate and plugging that in ultimately to a PEA study, and to determine whether to move into a pre-feasibility or feasibility study, or potentially even into a construction stage situation, pending results of the metallurgical test work and ultimately the results of that PEA study. We've engaged Fort Longyear doing the underground drilling at this point in time. We're getting very good production from that drilling, and our general team has done a very good job in managing that and tracing the mineralization down plunge on the project. Just a very brief overview now on our exploration activities in the Zambian Copperbelt. This is an image taken last year of our core drilling at one of the prospects on the Pangeni Project. Gives you a sense for the nature of the bush in that area. Actually quite a pristine area, and our exploration activities are undertaken in an environmentally sensitive way, where we're trying not to disturb any indigenous trees, etc., and rehabilitation of our drill sites are done on an ongoing manner. To give you a sense for the setting of this project, the start area there is the Pangeni Copper Project out in the northwestern part of Zambia. And the thesis of the exploration here is really very similar to the exploration discovery I was involved in of the Otjikoto deposit in the late 90s. The Otjikoto deposit would have been found 100 years ago by prospectors in Namibia if it wasn't for the fact it was completely concealed under a thin veneer of calcrete cover in the order of 10 to 20 meters thick. So we did some geophysical, specifically magnetics and EM investigations of that project, and then used shallow drilling to get through that calcrete cover, return information on bedrock geology and geochemistry, followed up with core drilling, and that led to the discovery of the Otjikoto deposit. In this part of northwestern Zambia, we don't have calcrete cover, but we do have extensive areas of Kalahari sand cover. So an old desert environment that's concealing, again, the bedrock, and it makes the use of conventional soil geochemistry and even more sophisticated soil geochemistry untenable. So what we're doing in this part of the world is now using very efficient, cost-effective air core drilling to punch holes through geophysically driven targets and recover information on bedrock geology and geochemistry. I kept very close to this project from my days with Antofagasta because I realized that the cover thickness here was modest, in the order of 10 to 25, maybe up to 30 meters thickness on average on the property. So very amenable to still, if you found a deposit, open pit mining methods. A number of major mining companies are exploring for sediment-hosted copper deposits, similar to those that we see in the Central African Copperbelt, including Anglo American with a very large land position to the west of us, where actually the sand cover does thicken considerably to more 100 and 150 meter type thicknesses. Rio Tinto have got a number of active exploration properties they're busy with at the moment in Zambia. And First Quantum and Barrick with significant copper mines, specifically in First Quantum's case, the Constantia copper mine, which is truly a world-class deposit, and the Sentinel copper mine, some 130 kilometers as the crow flies from where we are. One thing that's motivating those companies and others like ourselves has been the fantastic work that Ivanhoe have done in the DRC, in part of the same geological system of the Central African Copperbelt, where they've discovered and are in the process of developing the Kamoa discovery in the western part of the Copperbelt in the DRC. So this slide sort of just an overview of the sort of methods that we use to explore this part of the world. A land cruiser-based air core rig, very efficient, very maneuverable, so it doesn't need a huge amount of road construction. Punch holes through that shallow sand, cover areas, get ourselves bedrock geology and geochemistry, and then follow up with core drilling. So last year we had a very successful phase of core drilling. You can see some of the results there, meaningful true width intersections in the 5-meter range, running at about 0.5% copper. And importantly, that copper mineralization, which is generally hosted as chalcopyrite, although we have seen higher tenor bornite also in some of these intersections, associated with an alteration mineral called kyanite. That's important to those of us who are geologists and explorers because that same geological alteration assemblage is in the nearby Sentinel deposit, where that chalcopyrite is associated with the mineral kyanite. So really exciting relationships and early stage results coming out of that project in northwestern Zambia. We did drill some narrower but higher grade tenor mineralization, all related to an increase in the percentage of chalcopyrite, both in veins and disseminated, and in some instances a component of higher tenor bornite coming into that mineralization, which might give us a sense that we're getting close to the potential feeder structures of some of those individual prospects. So as we speak, we're about 2,000 meters into a 3,500 meter air core program in Zambia at this point in time. We've been looking to expand out from the known mineralization that we've now intersected last year, and also test some other high priority targets on this property. Those results are going very well and look encouraging at this point in time, and we'll start to report on those again by year end and early next year. So in summary, and really the sort of value proposition that we present to potential investors in BeMetals, that the company is truly led and guided by a team of top mine finders, builders and operators, as testament to the value creation that's been done through Bema Gold and B2 Gold over many decades. We get exposed because of those relationships to extensive deal flow. And that will help us both in the search for the precious metal projects, which is a priority for us at this point in time, and potential other mineral opportunities that may come our way in the coming years. Access to capital, as Derek mentioned earlier, we closed our first brokered private placement in August this year of 7.5 million Canadian, but possibly more importantly, was fundraising that we did prior to that when markets weren't as buoyant in the mining exploration sector as they currently are. We're looking now to expand our portfolio and add precious metals into the portfolio of our strategy and projects as we go forward, complementing our high-grade South Mountain polymetallic deposit and the potential that we have to discover a truly world-class deposit on the Pangeni property out in northwestern Zambia. So we're fully financed at this point in time to identify and secure that entry-level quality precious metal project, expand and update the resource base and complete a PEA study at South Mountain in Idaho, and also complete the current ongoing air core and diamond drilling on the Pangeni project out in northwestern Zambia, with that real potential to discover a world-class deposit. That kind of sums up an overview and hopefully is giving you a little bit more background on the technical team that's involved in BeMetals. And in future webinars, we'll be expanding that to give more detail on the current projects and update investors hopefully on our search for precious metal projects as the company evolves. Well, thank you for your time in listening to this, and we're very happy soon to do a question and answer session. If people have questions, we'll do our best to answer those.
Thank you very much, John. Just confirming you both can still hear me?
I can.
Wonderful. Let's get this Q&A started. So as a reminder to everyone watching, you can submit your questions in the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Let's start with this one from Tom. He says, good strategy with your stable of jurisdictions. One, in relation to B2 Gold, how much does the company itself own of BeMetals?
That's an excellent question, and something we normally touch on in our presentations. There actually is no cross-shareholding between B2 Gold and BeMetals, where we're truly a standalone company, but we do benefit from some of the similar core investors that have backed BEMA and B2 actually from their inception. And obviously we have common directors and senior managers of B2 that are directors and part of our wider team at BeMetals.
Perfect. Second question, also from Tom, and sorry if I butchered this name here. Dick Siloto is of course impressive. Has he been to Pangeni in person?
Dick actually hasn't been to the Pangeni project. The main reason for that is that the Pangeni project itself is, by its nature, is very much sand covered. So there's basically no outcropping geology to see on that property. But we have certainly discussed and looked at the core results and technical results coming out of that project. Dick has added real value for us, specifically at South Mountain in Idaho. You know, he's been out twice now, and in fact, in May we were planning another visit, but unfortunately, COVID put paid to that one. And we keep up to date. I'm probably in daily communications with Dr. Solito and keeping him up to date on how our projects are progressing technically.
Very good. And final question from Tom. He says, your search for a third advanced stage project, gold, copper, silver, zinc, Africa, Canada, USA, filed recent resource, bunch of options, bunch of questions. So what's your
other questions there? Well, the main thing is that next project will be focused on precious metals, specifically gold, and you know, in line with the guidance from our board and our experience base, we're not constrained by geography. I guess the current COVID situation has changed that a little bit, and it's difficult to get to certain projects at this point in time from a travel point of view. But I'm doing this webinar at the moment from my second stage of quarantine here in Vancouver, and I can see many more quarantines coming my way in the near future. But the important thing is we're trying to get boots on ground on the project. Ideally, in the gold space, what we're looking for is a project that has an existing resource base, a bit like South Mountain. That may be a little bit on the modest side, but the important thing is that we will have to see really good exploration upside. That's where we add our value as a company. So take a resource base, something we think is very close to being economic and something we could get potentially quickly into production, and then drill and expand that resource base to give the investors that uplift from actually doing our job, which is finding, expanding, and exploiting gold resources.
Nice. Moving on to our next attendee here, Ken is asking, please provide an update on the current and or upcoming mining regimen in Zambia, along with your and the industry's views on this.
Yeah, I've been involved in exploration and mining projects in Zambia for probably 15 years or so now. So it would be true to say that we have seen some changes over the years, specifically related to royalties, state royalties on mining taxation. That's gone both ways, and the Zambian government has tried various different routes with increasing royalties and removing corporate taxation, for example. Fact remains that Zambia, in my experience, and with a number of the major companies that are currently exploring there, such as Anglo American, Rio Tinto, First Quantum, is that if you find a deposit in Zambia, you will be able to put that into production. And in fact, the government will be very supportive in bringing new mines into production. We have some advantages in the way we've structured that project, in that we have a small private Zambian company who are actually the license holders of that project. I've been involved with them now for more than 7 years, and you know, that also helps us in relationships with the authorities Zambia. My relationship with the Ministry of Mines and others in Zambia has always been very positive. If you're clear and transparent and honest about the work that you're doing and the investment, I see no obstacles to developing ultimately copper discoveries in the country.
Great. Next one comes from Michael Chung. He says, can you talk a bit about the existing mill/concentrate at the Idaho project? Is it privately owned, and how close by is it?
So at this point in time, our relationship with the Idaho property is through an earning option agreement from the auctionees, Thunder Mountain Gold. There was an attempt to mine this project some years ago, but the joint venture partner of Thunder Mountain at that time ran into financial problems before they even got close to exploiting that. There might be some mining equipment that was designed for the project, but quite frankly, we would need to complete our own studies and see that was fit for purpose. And it's not currently part of the deal structure that we have in place. Sometimes you might need to go and redesign and start with new equipment to efficiently exploit the deposit.
Question comes in from George Petkar. He says, are you able to extract bulk tonnage from the Idaho polymetallic? And if so, how much per year?
We would be looking to start with a relatively modest tonnage at this point. Our sort of internal studies would suggest that we might be producing in the order of 25,000 tons of zinc in concentrate, and that would come with the associated precious metals and potentially copper. There's been the least amount of historical test work, metallurgical test work, been done on the potential of the copper component. So that will be one of our focuses for test work early next year. We'll be looking at the opportunity and doing various trade-off studies in the opportunity to possibly separate the chalcopyrite. I mean, that's an important fact, that most of the copper mineral is again chalcopyrite, a very conventional copper sulfide and easy to deal with. So that's where we stand with that at this point in time.
This is another one from Michael Chung. He asks, will you be looking to acquire more copper assets in the future?
I think that potential exists, but once we've got a precious metal under our belt, that will be our focus for a specific point in time. However, in line with the strategies that have been successfully deployed at both BEMA and B2, this is almost a never-ending process. So we will always be out there looking for the next phase, the next value-adding projects, and that could be more precious metal projects, or it could be copper-gold projects or gold-copper projects. We'll just have to see at the end of the day which projects come up that really add value to investors and shareholders. And as the company gets traction and we start to evolve into a producer, we can look at a number of opportunities then in possibly separating base metals from precious metals, for example. But at this early stage, we can really add value and incubate both precious metal and base metal projects within the current BeMetals portfolio.
On the vein of acquisition, there's another question here about if there'd be any possibility of acquiring a uranium project in the future. How does that fit into your investment thesis?
Yeah, good question. I think at this point in time, that would probably be unlikely. That's another more of a specialist field. There is always experience in our team on pretty much every commodity, actually. But at this point, we would probably not be really looking to get involved in uranium.
Moving back to Idaho for a moment here, Robert Radway asks, how near to Integra's project in southern Idaho is your South Mountain project?
Pretty near. We can basically see their project from across the other side of the valley. We are a project team there. We've put in our own project manager, a guy called Rocky Chase. He has a good relationship with the Integra guys. And there's been a good cooperation between between the project teams, certainly dealing with some of the COVID situations and policies. There's a small community at a little village called Jordan Valley, and there's good cooperation there between the two project teams.
Since we're on the topic of South Mountain, what is the biggest, or where is the biggest exploration upside potential at the South Mountain property, in your view?
Yeah, that's a very good question. In the short term, what's going to be really exciting, as from probably the end of this week or this weekend, we will start drilling on what's called the Texas zone, which is in the southeastern part of the project. That's an area that has had significant copper credit in the past, and we actually put out a news release about a month ago that showed some underground sampling data there from the 1980s that also showed there was a significant gold component to that zinc copper mineralization. So in the near-term drivers, that will be an important part of the project. Also, the results that we recovered last year was that we showed that we can trace these high-grade bodies down plunge. So there will always be scope to keep testing and expanding the resource down plunge. There are a number of other targets from the existing underground development that we haven't even touched at this point in time. And then in the more medium term, there's a whole area that we call the sort of northern limb, which has the same surface expressions of mineralization in terms of high-grade silver mineralization. Some of these patented claims were first pegged in 1904, and the prospectors at that time identified the value by looking at high-grade silver mineralization outcropping on surface. And there's a whole limb that has had no drilling. And from what we're learning increasingly about the geology of the system, it would be sort of surprising if there wasn't more polymetallic mineralization underneath those currently untested areas. So that will be sort of a medium-term target for us. But if they came off, that could really start magnifying the potential of the project. And we know from a geological sense, these carbonate replacement deposits can evolve into significant deposits.
Another question here from George Pecker. He's asking, is there a possibility of seeing copper cash flow in 2021? And if so, is that an M&A opportunity?
From our projects specifically, I would say that there isn't really, we wouldn't be able to get cash flow on our copper projects, either the copper component to South Mountain or obviously the exploration stage Pangeni project. But copper is something that I'm personally quite keen that we keep to a degree in our portfolio because, the fundamentals of copper, as countries start to come out of the COVID situation and looking to build infrastructure projects to re-stimulate the economies, copper, and because of the importance of copper for green energy, the UK, for example, has now said it wants to be really aggressive in getting renewable energies. That will have a huge impact on the demand for copper going forward.
Speaking of COVID, since this wouldn't be a panel in 2020 if I didn't ask you about COVID-19, so could you just shed some light on how COVID has affected your operations? Yeah,
we've been pretty fortunate in that regard, and this was really not by design because I don't think anyone saw COVID coming earlier this year, but the fact that we've got project teams in the regions anyway means that we're not flying people around from Vancouver, for example, to the projects. So the difficulties around that has been dissipated. Obviously, we put into place some strict COVID policies and protocols for those project teams, but having our South Mountain team based effectively in Boise, Idaho, and staying up at near Jordan Valley, we've just rented a very nice a ranch, which is 4 miles from Jordan Valley, the perfect place to put geologists, and I'm sure they'll do a lot of great work and have quite a bit of fun there as well. And out in Zambia, our project has always been run in the field by a group based out of Cape Town in South Africa called RES, and they have project teams in country for other major mining companies, and they're currently on site for us. So that and having our friends from Pangeni Mineral Resources based in Lusaka means we're well established and independent in the region. And I basically take the punch and get out to the projects and just have to do the associated quarantine that comes with that.
Another question around Zambia. This one comes from Al. He asks, how do you find Zambia's political environment?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, having been involved in Zambia for a long period of time, Zambia is one of Africa's longest serving democracies since independence in the 60s from the UK, one of the first countries to get its independence. It's been in general very, very stable jurisdiction. The transition of power between the political groups has always been peaceful. And most importantly, at a grassroots level, the Zambian people are very, very welcoming. Certainly, in and around Lusaka, and even more so possibly out in the regions and the projects. And we've learned over the years how to integrate and do the right things in the communities. A lot of that comes from, at an early stage, projects like ourselves, comes from employing local staff to help with our projects and field activities, and bringing in elements of training into that, so that when we come back for the next field season, we identify the same people who've already developed skills in using GPS, for example, sampling protocols, the chain of custody that comes with that. And it's been a really good environment to work in Zambia over many decades now.
Very good. Switching gears for a moment to talk about this new potential gold project, what criteria are you using to identify which project to pursue, and what scale and size or jurisdiction are you looking for? I know we kind of mentioned this earlier, but I am curious to hear more about that criteria, especially for some of the individuals who have been joining us later in the Q&A period.
Sure. I mean, as people will probably understand, in that the assessment of any mining opportunity, exploration opportunity, is always on a case-by-case basis, really. But we're really looking to get ourselves what we call our entry-level project. And realistically, we'll be looking for a project that has the potential to ultimately produce in the region of 80 to 100,000 ounces of gold per annum. So if you back calculate that, you sort of come up with some magic numbers that's been in my mind since I started my career in the mining business. That always leads you close to a 1 million ounce number that you would like to see, because you would like to have at least that production for 10 years. But obviously we can be flexible, and part of the experience in the team is that we can take projects that are possibly earlier stage exploration, but then also really work on building resource bases, possibly ones that have a existing resource base that we could exploit quickly, and then rely on the fact that we would discover extensions to that, or satellite deposits to that initial resource base.
Awesome. I have one more question that I want to go over. I guess broadening it to the team here. Obviously, we've talked about your expertise. I would love to know how much money has your founding team invested of your own money into BeMetals?
I can answer that one. So I think between private placements and open market buying, it's probably close to $2.8 million. I mean, a larger part of that is going to be is Clive, but John and myself, the rest of the management team, we've all pitched in ourselves, and so I think it's about 2.8 million.
Awesome. Okay, cool. I just see that we had one more question come in right under the wire here. Do you have time for just one more? It's kind of a big one, to be fair, but
it's a big one.
It's a big one.
Sure.
I'll break it down if it's cool.
Okay.
All right. This one actually comes from Smith Weekly Research. They want to know, who was the major shareholder that came in under the last capital raise? Let's start there before I move on to the next part of the question. So who was that major shareholder?
I think at this point we're not able to say. It's an institutional investor, but they haven't been named as of yet.
Perfect. How long will that capital last if there are no moves on M&A? And if there is M&A, will there be a concurrent capital raise?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're well funded at this point in time. That would certainly take us well through into the first half of next year, depending on how the projects perform and what if you want to be a bit more aggressive on some of the projects. We're looking at some more innovative ways on getting funding for some of the projects that we have in play at the moment, which may pan out in the next few months. And when we find the right precious metal project, there is a good chance that we would then look to do another capital raising specifically for funding to take that project forward.
Wonderful. All right, folks, with that brings us to the end of our Q&A period. I want to thank each and every one of you who attended today. If you had a question but you were not able to ask it for whatever reason, or you just thought of one right now, and it's awesome, feel free to send it off to BeMetals directly. You can see I just put up their contact information on the screen, and they would be more than happy to answer it. Again, a big thank you to you two, John, Derek. Really great having you. I will pass it back to you, John, for the final word.
Thank you very much, Bianca. We've enjoyed that first webinar, and keep watching the space, and we'll be looking to do some other updates in the coming weeks and months with a bit more emphasis, possibly on the technical side of the projects next time, and hopefully soon a lot more on our corporate strategy and successful acquisition of a precious metal project.
Thank you, everybody.